Welcome to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. In this episode, host Jasmyne Peck speaks with the Penguin showrunner Lauren LeFranc about how the Max limited series explores the rise of the Gotham crime lord as a character study, the challenges of staying true to the Batman universe, and so much more. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. And now, Jasmyne Peck in conversation with Lauren LeFranc.
Hey everyone, welcome to Third and Fairfax, where we give you the facts about what's going on with writers in the industry. My name is Jasmyne Peck, and I'm a writer and WGA captain, and I'm happy to be here today with Lauren LeFranc. Lauren is a writer and showrunner known for shows like Impulse, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Hemlock Grove. And right now we are all privileged to discuss Lauren's latest project, The Penguin, which premieres in September on Max. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Where in the world are you?
I'm in New York right now. I'm finishing The Penguin. We are finishing color timing and visual effects on the last few episodes before we air.
That's exciting. What are the feelings pre-premiere?
What are the feelings? I'm nervous and I'm excited. I think it feels like it's been a little secret of mine for a while now, so I'm ready for it to go out into the world, and we'll just see what comes from there. But I'm proud of what we made, and I'm really excited for people to see what our cast and crew have done. Everyone is so incredible in the show and behind the scenes. So I'm very excited for everyone to see the work that was put in to this.
Yeah, very much so. I got a chance to watch 5 episodes, and they are all like delicious little morsels, especially as a Batman fan. Um, Tell us a little bit how you like found this project, or how this project found you.
Well, Joey Chavez and Sarah Aubrey called me from Max back in 2021. And I was developing other things at the time. I had wrapped my last show, Impulse, and they called to see if I would be interested in, writing a limited series about the Penguin
Mhm.
in Matt Reeves' universe. And this is before the Batman was out,
Oh,
so Matt was still editing the Batman.
mhm.
So I first got to read the script, which was exciting. I had like 1,000 lock and key weird things to get access to that script, and made it through there, which was great. It was a great read. And then I just started to think about Oz. I mean, basically all I was told is that they wanted to do a rise to power
Mm.
story in the vein of Scarface. That's all I knew. And beyond that, they were open to, what my interpretation of that might mean. And then really when I finally got to talk to Matt, which was amazing, I quickly realized we connected and bonded on how we viewed character, on emotional storytelling. And so all the different ideas and things that I was thinking about in terms of Oz psychologically, he was really excited about. And so we kind of just had that connection. And it went from there. And then eventually I got to watch the first 40 minutes of the Batman by myself at Warner Brothers because Matt was still editing it, but he gave me a little sneak peek so I could see what Colin was doing as Oz. And it was really astounding. So, yeah. And then from there, I just kept developing it. And here we are.
That's awesome. You mentioned Scarface. A lot of people, the word on the street is like the Sopranos in the Batman universe. What were some of
Right.
the other inspirations for you in terms of material?
Well, for me, I'd never written a crime
Mhm.
drama, which is what excited me about doing this. I just wanted to see if I could do it, partly. I'm always trying to find things that are different than what I've done before. Obviously, I've worked in a lot of genre, but nothing, this is grounded. I mean, it's just, even though it's called The Penguin and it's in the DC universe, it's a crime drama, it's a character drama, and it's just about this larger than life character that is Oz, but he's a man. Um, and so for me, I did a lot of research. I read a lot of different books. I watched a lot of different films. I went back to things like, Godfather, Goodfellas, The Long Good Friday as inspiration. I read Prince of the City and watched a lot of documentaries. And I just wanted to make sure I was, sort of engulfing myself in that genre. And then for me, it was about seeing the things that I thought were like great about that, and then also seeing the things that I wished were a little different or that I thought could be like improved upon is not the right word because I do want to always
Hmm.
honor that genre. But like I felt like the female characters, for instance, were lacking in some of them.
Right.
Um, and even though like some of the, like even if you're looking at Michelle Pfeiffer in the more recent Scarface, the updated version, she's incredible because she's so watchable and great. But then when you like sit and take a step back, you're like, I don't think she has a whole lot to do here. So she's just a cipher in a way, and I don't know anything about her, and I wish I did because that would make it even better. So, um, I started to try to take my spin on it.
That's the way that Oz is really shaped by the women in his life is like refreshing and like also heartbreaking in so many ways in the way that he interacts with them, and it's like particularly his relationship with his mother and the way that impacts him. Um, History is super important in this show. How did you go about using history, like old debts, old mistakes, and old friends to make a richer narrative for England?
Yeah. Well, for me, uh, when I try to like figure out how I want to tackle something, when I want to write something, I always need to understand a character's backstory before I know how I can properly write them and give voice to
Hmm.
them. And so that's just part of my just I guess my method of going about things is I ask a lot of questions to myself about each character. And when Matt and I spoke, he was like, I really want this to be a character study on Oz. And I was like, yes, this is great. That's what's so exciting to me about it is you get to be in this guy's head, and hopefully you get to speak about toxic masculinity and our culture in a way. Though we're in Gotham City, it feels very reminiscent of our world in a lot of aspects, and certainly a man like Oz feels very relevant to a lot of the people who are popping up in our world right now who have a lot of power. um, and so to me though it was about, I don't know how to write him and have you connect to him or be disgusted by him or feel anything for him without understanding where he comes from and what built him, what made him. And to me, that it made a lot of sense to root it in his mother. In the comics, I read a lot of the different Penguin comics, and really then just wanted to make my own canon and take my own spin on it. But in the Pain and Prejudice, there's the mother figure, right? And so I took that as a notion and then wanted to create my own version of who I thought Oz's mother would be, where he got his like dirty mouth and where he got his ambition. And so for me, I built Frances, his mother, from that angle, and started to think about what shaped her, what she did and didn't have the opportunity to have, and then what having a mother like that would make a young man, a boy, become the man that Oz is. And the big questions I always ask are like, what does a character want? And not just in action, like what does he want? He wants power. Okay, what does that mean? And so to me, I started to think about what he would really want, and that would be, to be loved and revered by the masses, but by his mother predominantly. Um, and his greatest fear might be that love is transactional, as sort of where I came to in terms of that dynamic with his mother, and that his mother is withholding, and he just is desperate to make her proud. So trying to root it in something more
Hmm.
personal in that way, to try to have it feel more realistic and
Hmm.
relatable.
It's important to create sympathy for the devil in this case. And
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you want to understand empathy, sympathy. I don't know, they're tricky words, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to understand him and you have to empathize to a certain extent for you to go along for the
Mhm.
ride. Um, Hopefully, though, I mean, I hope you put something out there and then it's open to interpretation. That by the end you understand him in a deeper way and you're not making excuses for him. Is my hope. That you're attached to him in a way, and I think, I mean, Colin's so watchable. Everything he does, he's so charming, that you connect with Oz, and but I hope along the way you're also taking a step back and being like, oh, that's
Mhm.
unsavory. don't know how I feel about that. Is that okay? Because I think we have, in our own history and present day politics and everything, people can get really swept up in what a person says they're about versus what they actually really are about.
Yeah, I think like Oz's best friend and worst enemy throughout the course of the season is himself. And he's someone that's rife with contradictions. Um, what were some
Yeah.
of your favorite contradictions that you like wove into these characters?
Oh, favorite contradictions. I mean, I think everybody on our show, I hope, is
Mhm.
complicated, and we're trying not to live in the black and white. We're trying to live in the gray, and just to, have characters exist that feel like real people, in a slightly heightened universe, but that you can understand and connect to. And so I think everybody is
Mhm.
contradictory, and we're all the hero of our own story, no matter how other people see us. I think Oz is a narcissist. So the way he sees the world is the way he sees it when it's convenient for him. And I think he wants to help people. He genuinely does. I think he cares about people if it serves him, though. And when it doesn't serve him, then those people wronged him, and that's an issue. Um, you know, and I'm trying to like figure out how to talk about some of our other characters without giving things away. But but I think Sophia is very complicated. I think her drive, you start to unpack more as the season goes on, and I think it was important for me in creating her that Oz has an interesting antagonist, an ally in moments, an antagonist in others, because again, it depends on how Oz views her and like what she's doing for him and vice versa between them. Um, but to have someone see Oz from a different perspective was very important to me. And so you can start to unpack who those people really are. And so I think perspective, at least to me, is very
Very-
essential. Um, and that's why, the first episode starts in Oz's perspective. It's completely Oz's side of things, except for one brief moment at the end. And in episode 2, we start with Sophia. In episode 3, we start with Victor, and so on and so forth. So that was important to me because I think when you start to see things from different people's perspectives, then you start to see people differently. And the way Oz sees Sophia, for instance, in 101, we would probably connect to. And then I hope as we go through the season and you start to experience things through her lens, you start to realize that maybe the way Oz sees her is different than uh, than who she is.
Yeah, Sophia is such a rich character. I also, and maybe this is too spoilery, but I you mentioned psychology, and I think that the way that you use Arkham Asylum to like highlight the way that a lot of mental health care becomes carceral, is like brilliant. And there's this quote that floats around the internet all the time that goes something like, "Women often feel that they're on the verge of madness." Um, why did you go about unraveling like Sophia's quote unquote madness in the way that you do over the course of the season?
Well, I think for me, it's hard being a woman in the world, and and I do think it's easy to villainize women. I mean, it's easy to villainize
Mhm.
a lot of people who aren't like, I don't know, considered mainstream. I don't really know how to put that, but I just feel like there's something ripe for discussion. Like I always, especially in something that takes place in a place like Gotham City, for instance, it's not in one of our cities. So you can sort of, I think, explore certain themes and certain things that are going on in the world and get away with it in a different way because we're not saying something necessarily about our world, and yet we totally are. That's the beauty of genre. So when it came to Sophia, and knowing sort of the history of Arkham State Hospital and sort of how that's always been depicted in the comics, uh, I there's something so
Mhm.
of a different time, right, about that type of hospital, and women were constantly put in insane asylums for hysteria and a number of things, and it was largely men who were
Mhm.
putting women away. And then when we take a step back, it's like, well, who defines hysterical, and like, was that real or not, or was this woman doing things that like certain people in powerful
Mhm.
positions didn't like? So when I started to think about Sophia, I thought about
Well,
Rosemary Kennedy, who was sort of the hidden Kennedy daughter. And, there's a lot of different speculation about her, and really, was she mentally ill? Did she have, disabilities from birth? But what we do know, I think, a little bit is that she was promiscuous, and she said things that her family didn't particularly like, especially her father. And eventually she was put in an institution,
let's
and she
see.
was given a lobotomy in her 20s. And this woman just disappeared. And I think it's so heartbreaking. I've always found that story to be heartbreaking. And so, in thinking of Sophia, I did think about the Kennedys, because she comes from a wealthy family. Carmine Falcone has all this power. And I thought it could be interesting, given the fact that Arkham exists in this world, to have Sophia come out of Arkham, and we meet her in that context. And then we as an audience might put a lot of things on her. We might think she's crazy, because of course she is, because that's what we think. And that's what we inherently know, coming from it, whether you're a comic book reader or you just kind of generally understand someone came from an institution. Oh my God. To then get to unpack that and start to poke at that a little bit, and try to flip things on its head, and speak about the way women are sometimes treated or not believed. And also the world around us, like what could drive us to madness in a way. So I was just interested in that stuff, and this felt like a ripe way to kind of tackle those
You
issues.
mentioned wealth, and wealth is sort of the specter of it, at least, is a sort of a center of the Batman universe in many ways. Um, why did you sort of choose like these inroads towards commentary on capitalism in the way that the show sort of posits all of its characters in different proximities to wealth and pursuits?
Well, Matt established in his movie this like very
Mhm.
gritty Gotham City, and you could feel some of that disparity in what he created in the film. So I wanted to build off of that. And it also felt, because we pick up a week after
Mhm.
the events of the Batman, you know, there's this terrible flood from the seawalls collapse. And that's very real world in terms of like what that does to different neighborhoods versus others. And it felt right for to discuss wealth and class disparity within that the city is coming from a place that is broken. Gotham's always already been a little bit broken, but then this terrible tragedy happened, and who's impacted and who's not was very interesting to me. And the fact that because we're a television
Uh-huh.
show, we just get more time to tell these types of stories. Um, and so we get to spend more time with different characters and see different neighborhoods within Gotham to get to really dive into that stuff. So it felt interesting to me to make Oz an underdog. I mean, again, Matt had already established that Oz was sort of like the number two, or lower on the totem pole than he's
Okay.
depicted in comics to Carmine. But I wanted to make Oz come from a poorer background. Um, it's easier for me to write that type of person, because I come from more of a place like that. But also, I felt like him being an underdog in that way, and then relatable in that regard, might make you, I think a lot of what Oz says, for instance, in the show
Okay.
is true. Doesn't mean what he does is okay, but I think there's a lot of honesty in what he says, and he can be so brutally honest, which is great. But then, to meet a kid like Victor, and he's from Crown Point, which is a neighborhood that's more of a low-lying neighborhood in Gotham, and was more terribly impacted by the flood. And to contrast Oz and Victor, where they're from the east side of Gotham, versus Sophia and the Falcones, who sort of live on the equivalent of Long Island, like a
Mhm.
very wealthy part of the city. I just thought there was something interesting there, and always trying to counteract that sort of disparity and speak
Yeah,
about
I
it.
think also the characters that we get to meet in Eve, they so well by Carmen Jogo, and the little glimpses that we get into what it feels just to be a person in Gotham are so important in creating texture and really helping us like feel and understand this world. Um,
Yeah, Carmen brought so much I mean, you've only seen like
No.
five, so but she she
I
she's
know. Yesterday, I was
yeah,
like,
she's so
wait, what? I need, where's the Jimmy go?
good. Um, no, but I think with her, I it to me the way that Eve and her girls are that I wanted to make sure we depicted sex workers with like sex positivity too, and that they're kind of having fun. And it's not that there's not dark sides of it, but we've seen a lot of dark sides of it. In the Batman, we saw darker glimpses of it, and in general, that's kind of how it's more often depicted, especially in this type of genre. And so in a way, I find that Eve and her other like sex worker cam girl girlfriends are the greatest family in the show. They are the warmest, and they support each other wholeheartedly. And no other
Yeah,
family really in the show
they
does
feel like
that.
Oz is a safe place. They feel like a safe place for each other. And it's crucial to have at least one family that is not entirely dysfunctional.
It would be nice. I mean, our show can be dark in that way, but yeah, it seems nice to have one that you're like, these people seem
Yeah.
like they are solid.
Eve's last name is Carlo in the show. Is that an Easter egg for Batman fans, or is that mysteries to be unfolded later?
What
Yeah.
what did you say? Eve's Oh, Carlo. I mean, that's, my little nugget. It's really that's just, I love Clayface. I I made her last name Carlo because I think for her and what she does,
Mm.
she has to put on many faces. Um, and in her line of work, she caters to different clientele. And so that was sort of honoring the feeling and notion of that more than literally saying
The
like
streets will be
she's like
talking. Regard.
let the streets talk. No, I think I mean, it's also fun to me to have a little bit of fodder uh, in that regard. But, some of those things are not up to me fully when we get deeper
That's an
into
interesting
that
point
stuff.
that you bring up in terms of working on something that is part of a tie-in universe. Like, were there areas where you really wanted to go, where you were like, oh, I can't get over there because there's another thread that's being pulled here if I go there, etc. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you always have to do a little bit of a dance in that regard. I think what's helpful is I
mhm.
don't feel like our show is small, but it is in terms of the fact that we are honing in on these characters and we're looking at their emotional journeys and we're giving you a glimpse and an intimacy of this aspect of Gotham from this group. Um, like I always say that the Batman's up high on a building looking down at the city, and Oz is in the streets, and so there's just a different feel, right? He's looking up, trying to claw his way up to the top, and so you're getting a different sense of Gotham than you would if you're
Okay.
coming at it from the Batman's perspective, for instance. So, um, yeah, I think to me it doesn't always feel like limitations. It was definitely a conversation of like, can I do this? Can I set this up? Can I do that? Um, but really like what was the greatest strength I think in a way is to say, I know we're set up for a week after the Batman. I know we're
The
leading
book.
into the second film, so I know what those parameters are, and we're not going to like try to throw the kitchen sink in with all this stuff. We're going to make sure that it's hard. It's a character drama, and try to have you engrossed with these people. And it's funny, we're spending 8 hours with our characters, which is more time than we've spent in Matt's first film. So I hope anyway that like as this goes on that people are really engaged with our characters and care deeply about them, and that they become more seminal in a way than previous depictions of them, or just at least in a different regard, since we're a different tone than some
Yeah,
other like comic
absolutely.
book depictions.
Like the way that we delve into in what some iterations of Batman are much more like mystical or really brought in and grounded in a scientific mysticism. that is very palatable for people that might not even be like big fans of genre on the outset. So I feel like was this like an intentional like means to catch people that aren't necessarily typical Batman fans, or just the way that the Batman universe was constructed?
Well, I mean,
Hmm.
I've inherited again Matt's Gotham, which is a great Gotham to inherit. uh, and that felt very grounded. I mean, it feels so grounded, and weirdly made other depictions that I feel like were previously grounded
Hmm.
more like a comic book in a way, which I just didn't think was possible. So, as in, just even as a fan, I was like, oh wow, okay. Um, so that was very helpful. And then to me, I think I'm always interested in grabbing people who are not just comic book fans. Um, and that to me, like, I hope more women check out this show. I hope just a lot more people who think I never want to watch a comic book
Uh-huh.
television show will give it a try. I don't know if they will. But to me, I feel like there's, yeah, there, I tried to build a world, I guess, and characters with the help of like all my amazing writers and all our directors and our cast and crew and our actors who really bring everything to life to make it feel like it's accessible to a lot of different people. And despite the fact that it's called The Penguin, that it's just more grounded than you anticipate. But I also think, I think whose perspective you tell stories from matters. And I think having this opportunity for myself to come in, I see things a little differently than a lot of people who might have been given this opportunity before. And I think it'll feel a little different because of that, while still trying to like honor what this genre
Like
sort of
prior to
demands of
this project
storytelling.
coming up, like what was your relationship to this world and this universe? Were you a comic book fan growing up, or
Yes. Yeah. Well, my older brother was like so into comics, and so then I just tacked on to everything that he was interested in. I was like that annoying second kid being like, "What are you doing?" Um, no, I
well,
went to Comic Con when I was 11, I think, and so this was before it was pretty cool to go. It was cool to me. So I grew up reading comics. I read a lot of Marvel,
yeah.
X-Men in particular, but Spider-Man. And then DC, it was Batman and Superman, um, predominantly. And then I read some Image comics as well. So I was really into comics when I
Mhm.
was younger. I haven't like stuck with it in like the passionate way that I did when I was a kid. But if there's a new big movie coming out, I'm there that weekend. That's just always been something that I'm interested in. And so I think for me, it was taking at least what I loved about some of those things and trying to bring that and honor those comics in this depiction of them. And yet, Matt, the way he talked about the film, he took aspects of different comics here and there and tried to honor them, but it's not a literal adaptation. And to me, I wasn't interested in a literal adaptation of a comic book to a show either. And because he sort of gave the green light to like do what you want that feels like in the world that he created and built, that was really exciting to me. So I kind of took
What was
that
it
and
like
ran with
as
it.
the showrunner building a cohesive team, keeping the vision clear, and what were you looking for in your creative partners as you knew about that process? Before.
I just, to me, I felt like Oz is a bit of an outsider. And because I wanted this to feel different than other depictions, and because I wanted to bring different voices into the crime drama world, and again,
Mhm.
like who's a part of that storytelling, I was very keen on trying to find people who also felt like, outsiders in the way that I felt like an outsider as a viewer of these things previously, or a reader of these things previously. So I'm always looking for just different voices, different perspectives, and the way people see the world. I love detail oriented people. Like, I love curious, detail oriented people, meaning like, and this is where Matt and I really bond and connect, is that we both, I think, feel the devil's in the details. Like, we're very specific. about the world. I mean, very specific. And that is kind of an exhausting process, and so not everyone's like super into that. Um, but to me, it's like I just love people who dig into character from an emotional place, and that they want to get in the weeds a little bit of like how can how can we tell stories, for instance, in the background while we're telling the heart of our story. Like, what can we depict, how are we depicting, for instance, the people who live in Gotham in the background while we're with these characters. Like, we have the opportunity to do so much if we're like willing to like consider that and think about that. So um, and I always try to find people who have a very different perspective than me. That's exciting. I love pushback. I love dialogue. And my favorite thing is, if in success, getting to a place where, in a writer's room, for instance, if people are like, that's not what this character would say and or do, and they're saying that to me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, really? Tell me why. Like, let's talk about it. You know, I want people as passionate as me. No one will. I don't expect anyone to like put in what I'm putting in, but a lot of the great people that I've worked with on this do, and just elevate it, like just bring their own ideas and thoughts to it, and wherever the root of it is, like the foundation, that's important, but man, it just becomes so much better when there's
Yeah,
collaboration.
I think the way that
That's
you
what I
talk about detail is very like you can feel that as you're watching the show. And the one moment that really sticks out to me is when Oz puts a record on to dance with his mom and like talking about like loving complex characters and complicated relationships and using music to sort of reach someone that is drifted from you due to dementia, and like heartfelt moments like that can exist in this world with like blood and violence and drug abuse, etc. But even
mean.
the characters that feel like that we feel like hurt us the most have soft spots, and that's critical. Um,
No, I'm glad. Thank you for noticing that. Yeah, I mean, I think that jazz kind of plays a through line through our show, and it is rooted in this idea of when conceiving of Frances. I did a lot of research on different, forms of dementia, and she has Lewy body dementia, and it's just a very interesting, terrible disease and a confusing disease. It's often
mm,
misdiagnosed if you have MS. Um, but like all forms of dementia, music plays a big part in bringing someone like back into a place. And so that's sort of where that concept of music came from. And then it felt correct that a tone of music Francis would enjoy, Oz would also enjoy, because he and his mom are so connected. So it
yeah,
plays a
he
bit of
is his
a
mother's
through line through
son.
our show in that
Through
regard.
through.
He is his mother's
If you were
son.
in the
Yes,
world
it's
of
true.
the Penguin, this Gotham, what allegiances would you choose? Yeah,
What
you could go to
allegiances?
Falcone, you could go to
What do you mean?
Moroni, you could
Like
stick with
who
Oz.
I
Who would you pick to watch your back?
oh man. I mean, you don't
100%.
want to be on the bad side of any of these
Yeah, me too.
guys. I'd hang with Victor, I think Victor's a good guy. He's a neutral party who's trying to do good in the world.
Mhm.
I do view Victor as the heart of our show in a lot of ways. To me, he's sort of the epitome of that, a kid in Gotham that you don't often get to meet. Uh, and is just like a good kid who's been dealt a tough hand. Um, I don't know if Victor would protect me in the way that some of the others would, but he definitely, I think, would. I feel like I could rely on him.
Yeah, that's
I
a
don't
good
trust
answer. I
any of
think
these
I
folks,
would
these
pick that
other
answer as
folks.
well. And
Yeah,
you know, I
you're
feel
not
like
tempted
for
to go
some
hang with
reason
the
we wouldn't get
Falcones.
along so well. I think there's something. Maybe the new regime. There's an
Yeah,
in-house psychiatrist, so
yeah,
maybe things will get better. Um,
yeah,
I think like
yeah.
Thea Rossi is always lovely to see. And I wonder like that role is so critical. But I'm just curious about like what's next for all of these characters. Like, is there room for growth? Like, what do you see being next for the Penguin? Mm.
Oh, that is a tricky answer for me, where we've gotten to the end of the
Okay.
show. So I'm gonna probably avoid it. But look, I think everyone, like, us says to Victor, room to grow in the first episode. I think everyone has room to grow and evolve. And I think I hope our show proves that in different ways for each of our characters. But what the future holds, I don't know.
Good
I'm living
answer.
in the
That's
present.
that's very tight locked up. Um, what would your main advice be for writers that were developing a similar project or developing something with a large amount of source material?
I mean, I don't think
Mm,
it's worth doing unless you find yourself in any project, unless you find your voice within it and you feel like you can bring something out that hasn't been brought out previously. Um, so, to me, even though this is like very exciting IP, I'm not, I, that's not why I'm doing it. It's not what interested me. It was more like, what could we say about our world, and what could I bring from my perspective into a world like this that maybe hasn't been fully brought out before? Um, and making sure that you have great partners who are on board with that. So I think, like anything, it really is just about, do you have something here as a foundation that feels that also that feels sturdy enough that it's a long process, and it's always challenging to show run and to write anything. You have to put so much of your own
mhm.
self in it that it feels like time well spent. And so if you don't have a foundation, I think things get rocky really fast, and then you don't really know where you're going, and then the vision of what you have can falter. And so, I mean, I think a lot of my job as a showrunner is just saying what my vision is again and again and again, and trying to get people on board with it as much as possible and get them excited and passionate about it, so we can, like, try to make something that feels really special. So yeah, I would,
And what's
it's all
next for
about
you?
bringing
We
more
like to
stuff
ask
into it.
that. Can you tell us what projects you have on the horizon?
No, Jazz, I'm so tired.
Okay,
I am exhausted. Uh,
let's go.
so currently, I just want to hang out with my kids and my husband, because I'm at work a lot. Um, no, but I mean, I always am interested in sort of doing different things if I can, if I'm given the opportunity to do that. I don't know, but it's been a great joy to be in this world, as dark and weird and twisted as it is. It's kind of all the things that I love. It's like,
No joking.
in terms of
Safe
storytelling, not in
space.
how I live my life. I don't live my life this way. Yeah, yeah. No, but I mean, like, following a guy like Oz, he's got a dark sense of humor, and I love comedy. I started out writing comedy, and so I that's been fun to tap into. I like weird psychological stuff, and I really like, just getting to tell emotional stories. And even though our show has a lot of action and violence and things, there's a lot of, equally, if not more, two people in a room talking. And that's the stuff that makes me the most excited. It's just like big old long juicy scenes, and letting really incredibly talented actors do what they do
I
best.
think like
And
the
that's
power
always
of
a pleasure.
the change in a moment is so well utilized in the show, and there's so many of those moments where it's two people in the room talking, and that is like impactful as these larger like action sequences where there's a lot of like explosions and all these things happening, and it changes the story just as much, if not more so sometimes, and yet things can switch on a dime, which makes the show fun and exciting to watch. So I just appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, I mean, I think, yeah, that's always important to me. I think you have to care about these people. Meaning like not you don't have to like love them or believe in everything they believe in, but I think if you don't care about your characters or want to watch them, then what happens to them doesn't matter. And so those action sequences don't feel as rich because you're like, oh, that's cool, instead of, oh my God, like, like I'm brought into that world. I mean, that's the goal. I don't know if it always translates, but that is the goal. And that again, the beauty of television, we spend more time with our characters. So hopefully we earn the right to sit with them and get to know them, and you hope that those scenes that are long where we're just inside and talking are just as engrossing, if not more so, than the action stuff. And when I meet with directors, I always say, like, I want you to think about how you're going to shoot a scene like that with two people in a room just as much as you're going to think about that action sequence. In a way, obviously there's difference, like not as many setups and just practically very different, but that you're shooting for subtext, and not just doing the basic coverage, but like bringing us in to the intimacy of whatever
Yeah,
that
I think
scene
like
is
there's
hoping
characters
for
that
tonally.
barely even speak over the course of the season that we still feel so invested in because they're loved, they're tied to other people that care about them. And so like their fate is just as heartbreaking or as much of a lean forward moment as other characters that you spend a lot of time listening to. And like I think that is a very powerful thing for a show to be able to do.
Thank you.
Anytime.
That's
I
very,
wouldn't say it, but I
very
didn't
nice
think
of you to
it.
say.
Like actually,
I don't know. I mean, like, I don't, you're just like being very
no
nice.
fluff,
So
no
I'll,
fluff.
I'll
This is
take,
over
I'll take it.
here.
I appreciate
I'm a
it.
sharp, hard tack journalist.
Okay. Okay. I'm in.
I am also out of questions,
Great.
so
Love that.
it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Okay.
Um,
No, it's been great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And very great questions. Like, really.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. If you like this episode or have a comment, email us at podcast@wga.org. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. And see you next time.